History is rarely as simple as it's told to us. The stories we learn often leave out crucial details, shaping our understanding in misleading and incomplete ways. Sometimes, the truth only emerges decades later, when secrets are revealed, or witnesses finally find the courage to speak. This is especially true when powerful nations interfere in the affairs of others, often behind closed doors. The 1953 coup in Iran is a prime example, a story long framed as a Cold War necessity, but really about oil and power struggles. Understanding these hidden histories is absolutely vital. The coup didn't just end a chapter in Iran's history, it began a legacy of mistrust and upheaval that still lingers. Its consequences still echo across the Middle East and in Iran's relations with the West today. To truly understand the present, we must question the simple stories and seek out what was left in the shadows of history. Operation Ajax reminds us, meddling in another nation's politics can have explosive, lasting results for generations. The 1950s are often remembered as the height of the Cold War, a time when the world seemed divided into two camps, East and West, communism and capitalism, locked in a tense standoff. The official story of the 1953 Iran coup fits neatly into this narrative, presented as a bold move to stop communism from spreading into the Middle East, a region seen as strategically vital. But this version misses the real story, glossing over the deeper motivations and the human cost behind the headlines. Iran wasn't on the verge of a communist takeover. It was a nation striving for democracy, self-determination, and control over its own resources after decades of foreign interference. The heart of the conflict was oil, not ideology. Control over Iran's vast oil reserves meant power, wealth, and influence, not just for Iran, but for the world powers vying for dominance. For decades, Britain's Anglo-Iranian oil company reaped huge profits while Iranians remained poor, watching their nation's wealth flow overseas as their own communities struggled. The movement to nationalize oil was about reclaiming dignity and wealth, about ordinary Iranians demanding a fair share and a voice in their country's future. The coup was a reaction to this economic rebellion, not a Soviet plot. Western powers feared losing control over oil far more than they feared communism in Iran. Focusing only on the Cold War erases the Iranian people's legitimate aspirations, their hopes for democracy, justice, and national pride. The 1953 coup was the destruction of a popular democracy to protect foreign financial interests, a turning point that would shape Iran's destiny for generations. This truth explains why the event left such a deep scar on Iran's national psyche, fueling resentment and mistrust that lingers to this day. The legacy of 1953 continues to poison relations with the West even today, reminding us that history is never just about governments, it's about people, their dreams, and the consequences of choices made in distant capitals. At the center of this story stands Mohammad Mossadegh, a figure whose legacy still echoes through the corridors of Iranian history. He was no radical but a European-educated lawyer and a passionate believer in democracy. Mossadegh's education in Switzerland and France shaped his world view, giving him a deep respect for constitutional government and the rights of the people. In 1951, Mossadegh became Iran's prime minister through a democratic process, chosen by parliament and celebrated by the people as a leader who would put Iran first. His main goal, a fair deal for Iran's oil. For decades, Iran's vast oil wealth had been siphoned away, enriching foreign companies while leaving Iranians in poverty. The British-owned Anglo-Iranian Oil Company controlled Iran's oil fields, paying Iran far less than it paid in taxes to Britain. The imbalance was staggering, fueling resentment and a desire for justice. Mossadegh tried to negotiate a fair agreement, but the British refused. Talks broke down, and the British government responded with threats and economic pressure. Frustrated, he nationalized the oil industry with overwhelming public support. This bold move electrified the nation and sent shockwaves around the world. For Iranians, this was a moment of pride, a declaration of economic independence. Ordinary people felt empowered, believing that at last their country's resources would benefit them. Mossadegh became a symbol of self-determination for developing nations. His defiance inspired movements across the world, from the Middle East to Africa and beyond. He was a true democrat, believing in the rule of law and a free press. Mossadegh welcomed criticism and encouraged open dialogue, setting a new standard for leadership in Iran. Iran's political life flourished under his leadership, with open debates and a vibrant parliament. Political parties and newspapers thrived, and citizens felt their voices mattered. Mossadegh envisioned a constitutional monarchy, where the Shah would reign but not rule. He believed the monarchy should serve the people, not dominate them. Yet, this champion of democracy became the target of British and American efforts to remove him. His independence and popularity made him a threat to foreign interests. His vision threatened powerful interests. The struggle over Iran's oil became a global crisis, drawing in intelligence agencies and world leaders, and for that, he was marked for destruction. Mossadegh's courage and ideals would soon face their greatest test, changing the course of Iran's history forever. To justify intervention, Britain and the US painted Mossadegh as a communist threat. They exaggerated the influence of Iran's two-day party and claimed Mossadegh was opening the door to the Soviets. This narrative was a smokescreen. Mossadegh was anti-communist, from a landowning class with much to lose from revolution. He allowed the two-day party to operate legally, but worked to limit its influence. The real motive was oil, not ideology. The British knew anti-communism would win American support. When Eisenhower took office, the US became receptive to the British plan. The coup was sold as a Cold War necessity, but it was really about regaining control over oil. Publicly, the West spoke of stopping communism. Privately, it was all about oil. For Britain, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company was a pillar of national wealth and power. Losing it was unthinkable. Nationalization threatened the colonial order. If Iran succeeded, others might follow. The US saw opportunity. American oil companies wanted access to Iran's reserves. The crisis created by nationalization opened the door for them. The coup was an economic decision disguised as a political one. Western powers wouldn't allow a popular leader to threaten their dominance. Iran's democracy was sacrificed for oil profits and strategic interests. The fate of millions was secondary to the interests of global powers. Before the coup, Britain and the US waged economic war on Iran. Britain organized a global boycott of Iranian oil, crippling the economy. The Abadan refinery shut down, government revenues collapsed, and hardship spread. The goal turned Iranians against Mossadegh and forced a return to British control. Mossadegh defended Iran's rights at the UN and World Court, winning global sympathy. The US cut economic aid, deepening the crisis. Despite immense pressure, Iranians stood firm, refusing to surrender their sovereignty. The boycott failed to topple Mossadegh, instead fueling anti-British sentiment. When economic pressure didn't work, the West turned to covert action. With economic pressure failing to achieve their aims, the CIA and MI6 launched the covert Operation Ajax. Their goal was clear: overthrow Mossadegh and restore the Shah's power to the throne. Kermit Roosevelt Jr. led the operation, arriving in Tehran with bags of cash to orchestrate the coup from behind the scenes. The CIA unleashed a propaganda campaign, paying newspapers to smear Mossadegh as corrupt, anti-religious, and a threat to Iran's stability. They hired mobs to stage violent protests, creating chaos and the illusion of a popular revolt against Mossadegh's government. The plan was simple: make it seem the country was collapsing, justifying military intervention to restore order. The CIA bribed key military leaders, persuading them to turn against Mossadegh at a critical moment. On August 19, 1953, chaos erupted in Tehran as the coup reached its climax. The military, backed by hired crowds, stormed Mossadegh's home in a dramatic assault. After fierce fighting and resistance, Mossadegh was arrested and taken into custody. The Shah, who had fled the country, was flown back and triumphantly restored to power. Operation Ajax succeeded. A democracy was destroyed in just a matter of days. The West had its oil, but Iran lost its freedom and its hope for a democratic future. How could a foreign coup succeed so easily? Iran's democracy was young and fragile, with power divided among competing groups. The Shah, meant to be a figurehead, sought absolute power. The CIA exploited his ambition, convincing him Mossadegh was a threat. The military's loyalty was split. Many officers sided with the Shah. Economic crisis created unrest, providing recruits for street mobs. Propaganda deepened divisions between secular and religious groups. By manipulating these weaknesses, a weak democracy, divided military, and economic hardship, the CIA shattered Iran's democratic dream. The coup exposed just how vulnerable the system was to outside interference. The coup's aftermath was exactly what the West wanted. In the eyes of British and American officials, their interests had been secured, and Iran's resources were once again under their control. The streets of Tehran, once filled with hope for democracy, now echoed with the triumph of foreign powers. The Shah returned as an absolute ruler, signing a new oil deal that overwhelmingly favored British and American companies. Western corporations flourished, while ordinary Iranians saw little benefit from their nation's wealth. The promise of independence was replaced by foreign dominance and economic inequality. For Iran, it was a national tragedy. Hopes for a more just and sovereign future were crushed overnight, leaving a deep wound in the country's collective memory. Democracy was crushed. The Shah ruled with an iron fist, silencing opposition and using brutal secret police. Political dissent was met with fear, imprisonment, and torture, as the regime tightened its grip on every aspect of Iranian life. The memory of Mossadegh became a symbol of lost freedom and humiliation. His image inspired those who longed for justice and dignity, even as his legacy was officially erased. Resentment simmered for decades, finding a voice in the mosques. Religious spaces became sanctuaries for political discussion and resistance as people searched for hope and meaning. Religious leaders, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, channeled this anger. They spoke out against injustice, rallying the disillusioned and oppressed to their cause. The 1979 Islamic Revolution exploded, targeting not just the Shah, but his American backers. Decades of frustration and repression erupted in a movement that would change the course of Iranian and world history. The 1953 coup fueled anti-Americanism, leading directly to the embassy hostage crisis. The anger unleashed was not just political but deeply personal for many Iranians. By toppling a secular Democrat for short-term gain, the U.S. paved the way for a theocracy. The unintended consequences of foreign intervention would haunt both nations for generations. The long shadow of the coup created problems far worse than those it was meant to solve. Instability, mistrust, and cycles of violence became the new reality. The lesson, the true cost of hidden history is paid for generations. Each new wave of Iranians inherits the consequences of decisions made in secret, far from their own voices, and its echoes still shape our world today, reminding us that the past is never truly gone. It lives on in the choices and struggles of the present.